Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our webinar programs brought to you by LEGO. If you've missed any of this year's webinars, check out our library full of on-demand recordings for any that you might have missed. Visit alego.com/webinar to learn more. We've got a great topic for you today, Mastering Virtual Executive Presence, Influence with Impact in a Digital World. My name is Marcus Woodard, and I'm your producer for today, coming to you from Charlotte, North Carolina, in the US. This presentation is being recorded, and an on-demand version will be emailed out later today. Right now, I'm going to have everybody go into the chat and change the drop-down from hosts and panelists to everyone. After you do that, let us know where you're tuning in from today. We want to make this as interactive as possible, so feel free to add your questions and comments in the chat and the Q&A panel, and we're going to do our best to get those answered live. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Julie for a quick intro. Julie, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Marcus. And welcome, everyone. My name is Julie Hansen, and I am here today to talk about mastering virtual executive presence. You'll learn a little more about me as we go, but I have a background in sales and leadership and also a little acting career along the way that oddly came into great use after the pandemic. And I do a lot of training around executive presence, virtual presentations. And I had started out, again, as a salesperson, worked into leadership, and so been a little on both sides, and so enjoy working with teams and leaders on making sure that we're communicating as clearly and impactfully as possible. So we are, again, going to talk about mastering virtual executive presence, which is a relatively unexplored area. I think we all have been very well-versed in what executive presence is and different skills, perhaps had some training around that. Certainly not an unknown concept to most people. But just the virtual part is very, very different. And so as far as I know, I'm the only person that actually really focuses on this specific area because it is so different. And I think we try to blend them all together, and it's just each medium has very specific skills, as you're going to learn. So we're going to walk through this because this is a sort of foundational skill or ability that affects your career, affects your ability to influence others, and we want to make sure that we give you all the tools you need in these rather uncertain times. So let's dive in. And what we want to talk about is, some of the challenges that virtual leaders, even virtual salespeople have as well, is what happens when we're in these virtual meetings with people, and what works in the boardroom just doesn't always work in the Zoom room. It doesn't translate, and because of that, there's a lot of miscommunication, missed opportunities. Not only does it not work with, when we're with executives or stakeholders, they don't feel, very engaged and heard. Our remote team members don't feel connected. And certainly there is a lack of connection to the mission and the purpose that remote workers feel that in-person workers or in-office workers are more in tune with. And so 44% of hybrid workers report they feel less connected to their teams. And of course, as leaders, there's a lot of people saying that, it's hard for them to give their team the same advancement opportunities as people working in the office. So a little disparity there that is not quite, quite fair at this point. It's also very difficult to build new relationships virtually. And I think most of us have recognized that on some level, but this was proven by Harvard Business Review. And certainly it's those relationships that we establish, if you think about pre-pandemic where we've met the people in person, those really were easier to maintain than going out and building these new relationships through the camera. And that's a real problem, whether you're talking about, new team members, or perhaps you're reporting to a new uh, manager or a new leader. How do we build those relationships without those in-person advantages we have? And overall, our influence is digitally diluted for a variety of reasons that we're going to talk about and how we can overcome that. But if you haven't noticed that it's difficult to engage your remote teams or stakeholders or get them motivated, I would be very surprised, right? I hear that from salespeople, I hear it from leaders, I hear it from everyone. It's hard to read the audience. So because of that, we miss a lot of those more subtle emotional cues that get lost, or we misinterpret them because things don't always mean the same when we're on camera as they may when we're in person. And that, again, leads to these missed opportunities and miscommunication. So let's take a look, first of all, what is executive presence? Like I said, most people are familiar with the working concept of that. Sylvia Ann Hewitt wrote the first book on it, and I continue to draw from her expertise, but she called it a combination of self-confidence and poise and authenticity that impacts your ability to inspire confidence others, and so that they believe in you and follow you. So that to me says, authenticity, trust, credibility, confidence, and competence. And certainly that's something that, again, many of us have, I won't necessarily master, but we are able to convey those qualities often very effectively in person, either through training or practice or a lot of feedback. Because if you think about it, we've had uh, thousands, tens of thousands of in-person communications going on where we get information like, oh, I said that didn't land very well, and we adjust because we can see people's reactions. And we don't have that same level of feedback or self-awareness in the virtual world, because we're still relatively new to this. If you think about, we have a lifetime of experience communicating in person, right? So to me, what executive presence is all about, virtual or otherwise, is that ability to be influential, and to influence with authority or to influence without authority. Because even if you have authority, you can probably attest to the fact that that doesn't always just get the job done just because you are the you are the authority. So how do we convey that same level of influence with credibility, authenticity, and confidence in a virtual environment? So you may be thinking, as you approach this session, well, do I perhaps have virtual executive presence? How much do I have? Do I need it? So I want to take a little poll here, and Marcus is going to pull up that poll here. And I want you to think about, are you the same credible, confident, authentic person on video as you are in person? So your choices are yes, no, or you're unsure. So go ahead and fill in that poll, and let's see what you guys think. If you are the same credible, confident, authentic person on video as you are when you show up in person.
Yep, and if you are on the unsure side, and you have comments, go ahead and feel free to add those into the chat. Would love to hear what you're thinking. And we're going to give this about another 15 seconds or so. So get your poll question answered right now. You should see it on your screen. If you've got multiple screens, you might have to search around and find it, but it is on one of them. Um, so we'll give it another couple seconds here. We got about 75% of
All
you
right. What do
chimed
we see?
in. I'm gonna go ahead and end it here,
All
Julie.
right.
Still got they're trickling in up to 80%. Um, so let's see here. End it and share the results. So you should see it on your screen.
Okay.
47% said yes, 33% said no, and 20% said unsure.
Okay. All right. So very interesting. No one here is necessarily wrong. Give you that. This is a subjective question. Uh, if you said yes, it's you. I will say it is true. It is likely that you bring that same level of internal credibility, confidence, and authenticity, whether you're over here on the camera or you're sitting over here talking to someone in person, right? You don't turn into another person necessarily, right? However, if I ask this question another way, do you think you are perceived by others as the same credible, confident, authentic person on video as you are in person? I'm guessing we'd see a lot more uncertainty, right? And uncertainty, or some people know, like I can, I can communicate better when I'm in person. I am more influential. I can appear more confident, engaging. So that is really the question that we are out to answer. It's not so much what we think, it's how do others perceive us? Because ultimately, perception is reality, right? Uh, we can think, our intentions can be very good, but if they aren't conveyed to the other person, they don't land right the same way. And as a leader, or anyone who is in the business of influencing others, you really can't afford to be in the dark about how others perceive you on their screen. And so we're going to start to shed some light on that because, again, we haven't had a lot of good objective feedback in this area. So we're kind of going on a hunch, like, yeah, I think I'm pretty good. I think others see me as credible. That's not good enough if we're really trying to connect with others, influence, and make a difference. And perception is not just, about those connections, and certainly with our team members and our stakeholders, but it's also about our career. And as Sylvia Ann Hewitt put it, promotions aren't a function of just your ability, your value, or the numbers, but also critically on how you are perceived. And maybe some of you are in a job hunt now. And certainly what I'm hearing is most of those initial ones are virtual, which can be very demanding because I hear people have 10, 15 interviews, right? And that perception is really vital. That perception is the real game changers that Forbes has found out was that it's your behaviors and your leadership presence coming across, which create trust and confidence in your capabilities. So it's sort of vital, whatever career stage you are in. And it's something that we have not spent a lot of time focusing on, just this narrow window that really has such a great impact on so many people that we're trying to reach. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the difference between traditional in-person and virtual executive presence, why it's different, and how we need to adapt. Then how you are being perceived, especially when it comes to that first impression, where many perceptions are formed and they stick. And then we'll talk about some of the top trust builders and how to convey confidence and credibility, as well as give you some suggestions on how to continue to develop your virtual executive presence. In the meantime, please type in any questions in chat. I will try to get to them as we go, or certainly at the end we should have time. All right, so let's talk about, if we break down what executive presence is. I think a lot of people know it when they see it, but they haven't really thought about, well, what does that mean? It is credibility, it is confidence, it's authenticity, active listening, empathy, EQ, poise. It's a lot of qualities that, and these 5 in particular, are actually the same qualities that we determine whether to get into a relationship with someone. So if you think about it, you wouldn't enter into a business or a personal relationship if the person wasn't credible, right? If they didn't have some level of confidence, if you didn't think they were being their real selves, or they didn't hear you or listen. So these qualities are really important that we are clearly conveying them to our audience. They are also the most difficult qualities to convey virtually. And that's where this chasm exists. So really, if you have not done anything to adapt your behavior to the camera, you are likely not communicating or conveying executive presence in the same way that you do in person. And here's the thing: commuting on camera is absolutely an unnatural act. There's no reason you should be good at this, even if you have just been, if you've had 5,000 Zoom meetings. Most of the people I see are repeating sort of the habits that they established 5 years ago. And I will tell you, 5 years ago at the start of the pandemic, the advice that many people were given was not always from the top sources. It was a lot of, well, Bob's done videos for a long time, so he said to do this. And so some of these habits that we've developed or that we've taken in, we've either adapted and sort of developed our own style have not served us as well because we never learned like the best techniques. We didn't understand how our audience perceives us on the other side. So we're gonna try to correct that a little bit. And I just want to share with you my journey in this very quickly because I started out as I told you I did some acting, and I started out like most actors doing screen acting, and I had a chance. I'm sorry, in-person acting. And when I moved to New York, I had a chance to do some screen acting, and I had an audition for a little show you may have heard of called Law and Order. And I went into that, and I did exactly the same thing I did for an in-person audition. And the camera went on, and I suddenly didn't know, should I be staring at it? Should I look at the other person who's reading the lines? What do I do with my hands? Very awkward. And after 15 seconds, they said, okay, cut, thank you, we'll be in touch. Of course, they were not in touch. And I did not get that role. And I did not get anything for several months until a friend in the business finally said, well, are you taking any on camera training? And I said, no, is that what people do? And so, shortly after that, I started booking commercials and small parts in TV shows, like Sex and the City. That's not me, obviously. Here I am, looking very sad. Season 3, the original episode, the original series, Miranda's Mother's Funeral, for those of you who follow. So anyway, I learned a very valuable lesson, and that was it's a new medium. It requires new skills. And we are in the same position here now as as we are in this virtual or hybrid world. So when the pandemic struck and I saw everybody just, our organizers or organizations sending us these messages, okay, get a camera, get on Zoom and go, do what you do. I just was horrified. It's like, why are we not helping these people convey themselves in a way that works on camera? And so we just really sort of jumped ahead of ourselves there. And so I wrote a book, Look Me in the Eye, which is really a tactical guide on how to interact on video, how to convey all these qualities that we're talking about. And since then, I've done on-demand courses and assessments, which I'll talk more about at the end, and coaching. But really just to help people understand, this is not something that obviously is going away. It's also not something we can just kind of slip into and hope to have the same results if we don't work at it. So we're going to give you some tools today to help you start to work on it and to start to understand a little bit about where you need to adapt and how to do that so that you can be as effective virtually as you are in person. So let's talk about some of those first moments when people make their decision about who you are and how that impacts our relationships with others and our influence. So if you think about the virtual world, about how people perceive you, I like to compare this to an iceberg. So if you were the captain of a ship and you saw this image ahead of you, you might say, you know what, let's not get too close to that. It looks a little dicey, because you can see the full thing, right? Now, if you could only see the top 15, 20%, you might think, oh, that's beautiful. Let's go check it out. Maybe there's some penguins there. Because you don't see the whole picture. You're missing a lot of information. Well, this is precisely what happens in our virtual interactions. We are taking away 80% of our body language, all that in-person energy that we bring, and whatever that connection is that happens when we're in person. And we're left with this 20%, and you don't necessarily know what your 20% is saying to others. Does it say the same thing as your 100% when you're in person? That's impossible, right? If you haven't adapted. Because of what the camera does and because we're just looking at a small piece of you. So how do we, first of all, understand what our 20% says, make sure it says what we want it to say so that we can be perceived as the confident, credible people that we are? That's the question. So one thing that I've done is develop this virtual executive presence assessment, which helps people understand, well, what is it? What are the behaviors that convey credibility and confidence and engage people? What are the behaviors that make that first impression, make me look less confident and credible? And so it's that self-awareness that is really lacking. And so there are ways to develop that, and we'll talk about that at the end. But really, it is a combination of, how people perceive us is a combination of, that physical part, which is study was done, how people perceive us initially, and most of that is that blue mass. 55% is what they see physically, 38% from the sound, the tone, the quality of voice, and 7% from your words. Now, of course, I always like to say, it's, if your words are gibberish, it doesn't matter how great your body language is. But most of us are in an arena where we're competing with people that also have good words, right? And they may be very similar words to what we're saying. So this is an area where we can stand out. So in those first impressions, in 7 seconds or less, people decide if you are confident, trustworthy, likable, worthy of attention. Those are pretty powerful lenses that people are going to be viewing us and taking in what we have to say. So we want to make sure we get that right. Some even more powerful statistics is that in a tenth of a second, just by looking at someone's face of a stranger, we decide if they're competent, likable, aggressive, or trustworthy. So let's take a look at what we see on most faces when we get in a virtual meeting. Yes, it is the blank poker face that I call resting business face. And it doesn't give off an ounce of interest or information, right? And it is something new to us. It's not a face that we're used to seeing when we meet someone in person, right? So it throws you off as both a presenter, and it throws you off, as an audience member if your presenter looks like that. So very off-putting. And it's sort of a reflex reaction, as we'll talk about later, about just the passivity that people come to a virtual meeting with. Another statistic, in 20 seconds, complete strangers will pick up on whether you're trustworthy, kind, or compassionate, but just by listening to your behavior when listening to someone talk. So they're watching you listen. Now, what does listening behavior look like in virtual meetings? Well, it's not much better, is it? They're either looking at the screen or darting around, looking from screen to chat to images to screen. Neither one conveys credibility, confidence, or interest, and that's problematic, right? Now you might say, "Gosh, people know when I'm looking down; they know I'm looking at their image." But I guarantee you, most people are not going to assign the highest intentions to your behavior. They're not going to think twice about it, right? They just know how they feel. And relationships are really all about emotion and not logic. So it starts with your virtual stage. And I'm not going to go into a lot of basics here because there's plenty of information on this. I'm going to try to deliver some new nuances on it that you may not be familiar with. But your virtual stage is like in your control. Like everything in your stage says something about you. So it's the one thing that we really can control. So make sure that it says what you want it to say. Again, It's your 80% and your stage. So making sure you have professional clutter-free background, that seems pretty standard, but you'd be surprised what I see. And I'm sure you see a lot of similar that makes you wonder if somebody ever took a look at what their background was. It just mystifies me sometimes. What I want to point out is one of the biggest factors in executive presence and making people feel like they can trust you and connect with you is authenticity. So if you are using an artificial background, especially if it's so obviously artificial, that limits that authenticity and transparency that we look for in leaders and trustworthy people. So I try to aim for natural background, or at least if I'm using virtual, not making it very natural and not a cartoon character or something that is so out of this world. We want to be, of course, in a medium close-up. This is an area I still see people struggling with. Again, we want to see as much of that 20% as possible. And what people often do is get in what we call an extreme close-up, which is not just unflattering, but it's also very off-putting and can be really too assertive for new people in certain cultures. This is something that I see missed a lot, because setting camera at eye level, it seems very simple, right? But just because you can see your camera does not mean it's eye level, right? So we have to find the sweet spot, and sometimes that takes an outside perspective to help you find that by sending someone a screenshot. Say, does that look like I am looking at you? But it's very important because eye level conveys status, and that is something that is unspoken in any relationships, but oftentimes we sort of subconsciously size up how we fit in relationship to others. And so certainly if you're looking down at someone, it conveys that that you have a feeling of superiority. If you're looking up, it's a feeling of inferiority. So we want to make sure that we're managing those subconscious signals as well. So that is really our first virtual trust builder, is prioritizing that, creating that equal status and transparency in our staging and setup. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about what confidence and credibility look like on camera and how we develop that, and some of the mistakes that I see made. These are two of the most important qualities of executive presence. And of course, if you think about it, it makes sense that direct eye contact conveys confidence, right? You expect someone to look away when they're sheepish or don't feel good about themselves. And so we expect that from leaders. And actually, there's studies that show that leaders typically make more direct eye contact. It also conveys credibility. We are more likely to believe statements by people who look us in the eye as compared to those who avert their gaze. Now, this doesn't mean that everyone's telling the truth because they look you in the eye, but that, again, is our perception. So of all the people in this Zoom meeting, I'm probably going to trust Jessica primarily. So if you think about it, and I want you to type this into chat, name a movie or TV show where the actor looks directly at you, at the audience. Might be something recent, might be something from the past. I got a blast from the past. Saved by the Bell. Wow, nice callback. I find this exercise dates us. So The Office, Fleabag, yep, couple for Fleabag, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a very powerful skill. SNL, yep, they definitely do that. The couple for The Office. So, does anybody know what that technique is called? Type that into chat if you know. There's Fleabag for you, and a couple other examples, some movies and shows. Did anybody say Ferris Bueller? Oh, Breaking the Fourth Wall. The first one who said that. Brian, Lauren, Amanda. Yep, Breaking the Fourth Wall. And if you've ever, I remember probably one of the most dramatic times I saw this was watching House of Cards. I don't know if anybody saw that with Kevin Spacey. Super creepy character. And I'm sitting in the basement, And the first episode where all of a sudden he looked directly at me through the camera and I think said something creepy, it was like, get out of my house. I mean, it's a very compelling move. And we forget the power of eye contact until we see it used well or we see it used poorly, right? So we have this fourth wall now in virtual meetings and video calls. And so we have to find ways to break through it to connect with our audience. And that's how actors do it. And that's one of the techniques that I teach in my courses. And, how do we do that? When do we do it? What is that? How long do we do it? There's a lot of tactics around it. And eye contact is, besides being, showing confidence and credibility, it's also, a certain amount of it is required to build a relationship. Now, certainly you can build a relationship without ever making eye contact with someone or without seeing them. But does it take longer? Yes. Right. And, oftentimes we don't have the luxury of time to develop relationships. We need to develop them quickly in business and use all the tools that we have. So 67% eye contact, 2/3 of the time is what's recommended by experts. I say it's a little more on video because if you're not looking at the camera, we're not in the room with you, so we don't know what you're looking at. And we tend to think poorly of people looking elsewhere that, immediately go to, oh, they're distracted, they're reading something, they're bored, right? Think of what you think when you're, presenting and the audience is looking away. Not happy thoughts, I'm sure. So that second virtual trust builder is using eye contact strategically to show leadership, to develop relationships. These are a couple of the times that are very important to make eye contact at the beginning of the call. I always tell people, if you're looking anywhere, there's no reason to look anywhere else in those first 10 seconds, right? If the person is on camera and you can see them vaguely, the most important thing you can do is look at that camera and greet them, right? When the other person is speaking is very powerful as well. Make people feel heard, as you'll learn. Or when you're making a key point, it's going to have much more impact if I say one of the most powerful things you can do is just to look at the camera directly. That's going to have much more impact than if I said it. One of the most powerful things you can do is look at the camera directly. Right? It just gets lost, right? It doesn't stick in our mind. So using body language, vocal techniques to really reinforce key ideas. Trust is also conveyed through active listening. A study was done by Deloitte, and they asked business owners, what's the one thing someone can do to build trust with you? And the most common answer was listen. Now you might think, well, that doesn't seem that hard, right? And a lot of leaders and a lot of salespeople consider themselves, excellent listeners, and I don't doubt it. But our listening behavior looks very differently virtually than it does in person. What it looks like is, again, someone looking down, looking at all the other images, which is very much like the feeling if you were out with someone and they suddenly picked up their phone. It is the same feeling, whether we like to, believe that or not. They're not thinking, oh, she's just, she is listening to me, because it doesn't feel like it. So we have to adapt our behavior in this area as well. Also, those small vocal cues like the that indicate we're listening often get lost on video because of the two-way nature of the connection. So you don't look like you're listening, you don't sound like you're listening, you're not going to convince me you're listening. So we have to use more active listening cues just to reinforce that. Looking at the camera when others are speaking, whether it's body language, nodding, not getting too crazy with the head movements, but none of these exaggerated, but just what looks interested, right? What do you usually do? Because oftentimes what we usually do sort of runs out the door when we get on camera. It's like we only have this space, and we do have to adapt a little bit for this space. But think about what you normally do. Authentic facial expressions. We don't want to mug for the camera, but sometimes I find this a lot virtually, that we we don't use our expressive muscles very much. So oftentimes we have to warm those up more so that we have more access to them, so it doesn't feel like we're breaking our face every time we smile or make an expression. And of course, summarizing what you heard is, formally or informally, is very powerful as well. But we can't overdo that, so we have to use other skills as well. The other thing that breeds distrust is incongruent behavior. We simply don't trust people whose words say one thing and their body language says another. And we used to see this a lot on, the news, like coming up at 5, the air disaster that killed thousands of people. I think they're a little more emotionally in tune with that now, but we see a lot of, again, that blank face, disinterested look. So we want to make sure that we're aligning our body language with our words. And that means, if it's great to see me, make it sound and look like it's great to see me. I don't know how many virtual calls have you gotten on where the person's like, oh, I'm so happy to see you. It's like, are you? Because it looks like you couldn't be less happy. And, at the minimum, I like to know from your face if it's good news or bad news you're delivering. And I often say this to salespeople because they oftentimes will say, it's going to save you $250,000. With the same expression use with, would you pass the salt? It's like, come on, right? How are we supposed to remember that? How are we supposed to make an impact if everything is just at this, bland level? And that's what happens on video. Our energy is gone anyway. So that's, we have to add energy, but that's a whole nother subject. So is it good news or bad news? That's a bare minimum I ask on your facial expressions. I mentioned earlier that part of the problem with that rest in business face and how people react on video is that people are just naturally more passive because we come to a virtual call, a virtual presentation, a virtual meeting, especially with the idea that we're kind of there to take in information. But we have a long history of being in front of screens and just receiving information. We're relatively, again, new into this, two-way communication through a camera with others. So people show up just already a little more passive. If they're at their home office, they're even seated more passively, and they look, their body language is down. Your energy goes down, and when your energy go down, the first thing is gone is your expressions and your vocal, inflection, and everything just goes. And it's just a vicious cycle. And so what happens is people, speakers, leaders, salespeople lose their confidence. They lose their confidence. They doubt themselves, and they rush in and answer people's questions, or before they have a chance to answer them themselves, or they do long monologues because they can't stand that pause. And this just makes us look like we lack confidence or we're uncertain. It creates doubt in our audience's mind. Like, is this person as competent as I'd like to think they are? And this happens particularly when we pose a question virtually. I don't know how many people have had that experience where you ask a question and you're just waiting there and there's this dead air and it doesn't seem like anybody's going to answer. And it's, we are used to seeing this response. We throw a question out there in an in-person event, right? We can either see it from their body language or their facial expression, or, we can just see, Bill looks like he's pondering an answer there. We don't get any of that feedback virtually. Again, got the resting business face. We've also got the passivity, and the realization that there are a lot more other people. They don't necessarily have to answer or participate, right? And so a lot of people are quicker to take the back seat on that. So how do we maintain that confidence and credibility, engaging with others, and how do we improve engagement? Well, we have to learn to embrace what I call the purposeful pause, because it is a purposeful pause. What happens is a speaker or the leader of a call is we throw out a question, we feel like nothing is happening. Everybody's just staring at us, waiting for us to say something. And so we rush in and fill it, which of course teaches our audience that they don't have to participate. So you're not going to get any of your other questions answered as well if we start that trend. So what we need to do is understand what's happening in that pause so that we and practice that pause. Most people only pause 2 seconds and they feel like it's forever, right? It feels like the longest 2 seconds of their life. They don't realize what a 2 second pause is versus a 7 second pause versus 10. It just, in presenter time, it feels very painful. And we don't trust that something is happening with our audience. So I want to take you through here what happens when you ask a question in a virtual meeting. An overview of the timeline and what's really happening with our audience. So let's say I throw out a question. I'm going to say, what's your biggest challenge in virtual meetings today? Now, you weren't ready for that question, so you're thinking, gosh, what do I think? Oh, there's a couple of things. And then you may be thinking, okay, just what's the biggest thing? Well, I guess it's talking to people who I can't see. So you formulate an answer, and that all takes a couple seconds. And then you may be debating because, should I share it? Because maybe your manager's in the room and you don't want to indicate that you have this weakness, or you should know this. So you debate. And then the silence starts to grow and you think, well, maybe someone else is going to answer this. Jackie always, has something on this, so I'm sure she'll answer it. And no one answers. The time goes on and the pressure is built. And finally you say, oh, okay, I'm going to answer. And you have to unmute yourself. So all of this can take, 15, 17 seconds. Now, am I suggesting that you wait 17 seconds after asking each question? Oh my gosh, no. But if you don't pause more than 2 seconds, you are never going to break through this process. And you're not going to have engagement, and you're not going to be seen as confident and credible as you are. So thinking about when you ask a question, the pause, and I find people really have to practice this because it is so uncomfortable. Just knowing a lot of this information is not always enough to change our behavior because we have long ingrained, skills and muscle memory that we're trying to break and develop new ones. So very important to understand that process. And then also, I will tell you one way to increase engagement dramatically or to get your question answered faster is to combine this with looking at the camera while you're waiting for an answer. Because I guarantee you that puts more pressure on everybody to, it's like, oh God, she's looking at me, right? I mean, we know, again, his logic says she can't possibly be just looking at me, but it's emotion, right? She's looking at me, I better come forward. So I want you to try that and let me know what your experience is, because I find that just dramatically improves your response rate. Okay, so those are, 5 the virtual trust builders. I want to let you know that I actually have 10 of those in a handout, a PDF that you can download. There's the link there. I'm going to copy that, and maybe Marcus, can you copy that into the chat for folks? So that will give you the top 10 virtual trust builders. And let me share with you some ways to use that and start to work on developing your virtual executive presence. We just sort of scratched the surface here, but I'll be giving you a couple of things to work on. So the self-development path. There's a number of ways to do this. I find that most people are not very good at objectively reviewing their videos. And of course, that's what this is going to involve, is recording yourself and reviewing your recording objectively. Even as an actor, I couldn't watch myself on video. I'd be like, oh gosh, please don't make me watch this. But it's a skill that we have to learn. And one thing that will help you be more objective is to use that guide to sort of follow as a self-evaluation. I also have a guide that I use with the book, and if you buy the book, you have access to that self-evaluation form. Because what happens when you're watching yourself? It's like, oh, what is going on with my hair? And we start picking ourselves apart. We don't necessarily focus on the behaviors that indicate credibility, that show confidence, that are engaging, or what's our facial expression is in alignment. So we get way off track and we get disillusioned. So that can help you there. Look for what went well. It's always easy to pick ourselves apart on video. Look for what went well and where you can improve. And if you're so inclined, the book has very specific tips and tactics and exercises on how to improve a lot of those areas. So that's one way. The other way that is often faster and more effective is to get some objective professional feedback. And so the process that I've used with a number of teams and executives is, again, getting an objective professional assessment so you can see exactly where you're at and what you're doing that is impacting your virtual executive presence and what you need to do about it. Then using some proven practice techniques, because I guarantee you this isn't the first time someone has told you, you need to look at the camera, right? You've heard that before. Why are you not doing it? Because you don't have the techniques to understand when to look at it, for how long, when I can look away, what it means when my eye contact is this way or that way, or the ability to practice that and get feedback in the moment. So that's really how we change behavior. And then, of course, that feedback loop of trying new things, getting feedback and refreshing that is really vital. And that's how the people I've worked with have changed the most. And this is just one case study. I worked with a Fortune 500 company enterprise sales team. And before and after, they were able to improve their overall virtual executive presence by 65%. And interestingly, with the teams I've worked with afterwards, that is a pretty common area. So that shows you how much room for improvement is there. And this was, both leaders and new people. It was a good mix of folks. So it doesn't really have anything to do with your experience level, I found. It's interesting. So that's, if you're interested in that case study, it's on my website under the Virtual Executive Presence Assessment section. But it is vital that you do something, again, other than assume what you're doing is fine and, not developing that self-awareness and finding the tools to correct that in some fashion. So if you're interested, I have lots of information on my website, my blog, and videos on specific techniques and tips. You can reach out to me I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn if this is a topic that is of interest to you. I'm always posting things about that. And we'll just go to questions here if we've got some. Marcus from the group. So if you've got a question, still got time.
Yeah, so
Type it in.
I added in Julie's LinkedIn link to the chat. So go ahead and
Great.
click that, connect with her. And we do have a couple questions here. This one's from Phyllis. Any techniques to help you envision live people there when you are recording video?
Oh
Interesting.
gosh, absolutely. I mean, that is as close to acting as people get, is when you are recording a video, talking to someone who's not there, who's going to see it later. There's a whole section of my book. It's called Acting as If, and it is an acting technique, and that's simply what it is. It's a combination of sort of mentally how we project people into the camera, how we act as if they are reacting. A little tip I always say as a presenter: act as if they're giving you the best possible response. Um, you could be wrong, you could be right, but there's no downside because it will bring out the best in you, right? Otherwise, it's a real unknown for most people, and we don't present ourselves as best as we can on video recordings because of that lack of visualization and connection. Great question.
So I'm going to add in the resource room here as well. That's going to take you to where the recording will be, the slides, and then we're going to add in a bunch of different links that we've got here from Julie's website that she mentioned. I'll have her linked in there as well. This question comes from Felipe. Do you have any advice relating to the use of hands?
I have lots of advice. There's a whole chapter in my book on gestures. Um, Here's the thing. I think there's a lot of bad advice floating around about hands. So it's not that using hands is bad, using hands is good. If you are a gesturer and you are trying not to gesture, that's going to not serve you because you're going to spend all your energy is going to be focused on trying to keep your hands still, right? So we want to incorporate our hands if we are a gesture. Um, we have to adapt to what I call camera-friendly gestures, which is understanding this, the 20% rule here, developing that muscle memory about what's way out of frame, and how do we keep things in frame, and how do we use gestures to support what we're saying. I'll give you a quick example. One of the best ways to use them is to help reinforce, separate ideas and reinforce them. Like, so we're going to talk about three things today. Okay, so the first is, I know that seems really basic, but honestly, it's very effective. Or we're going to start here and we're going to end up over here. And so you have to know where your frame is to really pull those off and not make it look more distracting than helpful.
Great. So Sandra just asked a question here. How do you politely ask your manager or colleagues uh, to turn on their camera? I work with folks who do not turn on their camera, and it drives her crazy.
It drives everybody crazy. It drives me crazy too. Um, well, I'll tell you. I mean, it depends on the audience. I mean, you can't control obviously what your customers do, your stakeholders, probably your manager. You can make it, put it on you and say, hey, I'd love to, see your face and say hi. And oftentimes, if you just get them on to say hi in the beginning, they'll leave it on. You can put it in the invite, like, I'm going to be on camera. I hope to see you as well, just to give people a heads up. I find more often than not, it's a company-wide issue. Comes from the organization not being a cameras on organization. I worked with a lot of companies on helping on roll out a more cameras on organization by understanding what that means and why it's important and how they're missing out. So number of ways to approach that depending on the situation. Great question.
We've got a couple more questions here and about 7 more minutes till the top of the hour. So, what's one misstep or the one misstep that you see the most that kills mastering virtual presence?
Oh, yes. I would say more than anything, it is uh, the the lack of awareness around how we're moving and looking at the camera. So um, the constant, either the head movement or the looking away and looking back and forth, it just makes you look out of control, and it just does not convey a sense of confidence or credibility or preparedness. Even though I understand oftentimes we have to look at other things, but there's a process in the book in classes that I teach, which is kind of doing that virtual scan, which is how do we manage all these different inputs on our screen in a way that doesn't look like we're just crazy on video, right? So there's a process like looking at the camera, looking at the images. If you do it too fast, it's very darty. If you do it during times when perhaps when there's a transition in the slide, You can check other people's body language and it's not as noticeable. So there's a lot of tricks and tips to it.
Thanks. So I just added back in all the links so they're high on your list here. We got the resource room, Julie's LinkedIn, and then the landing page for the earlier resource. Like I said, the resource room should have everything later today, recording slides, and a bunch of the resources that we talked about here, as well as Julie's LinkedIn. So make sure you connect there. Um, let's see, let's take two more questions here. My sales team has been selling virtually since the pandemic. How can I tell if there's still room for improvement? Interesting.
Well, yeah, well, a lot of leaders who see their sales team really mostly when they are in team meetings, give them a pass for how they show up in team meetings. Whether it's they're look they're very casual, they're not they're distracted, they whatever people are doing, whatever they are doing, they are practicing. And so if you see those behaviors in team meetings, don't assume people are suddenly turning it on for virtual meetings with prospects. Um, that is very likely not the case. So it's what we practice becomes our behavior, and virtual behavior has to be developed through muscle memory. And so what I tell leaders is to have everyone show up at their best and behave at their best in virtual meetings, so they can practice that there. That's an excellent place to practice it, right? To practice eye contact, to practice reading body language and not totally disconnecting with your audience. So yes, that's a quick way to tell.
All right, so that seems to be it for the questions for now. I think we'll just give everybody about 3 minutes of their time back. I'll stay on for a couple minutes just in case some more questions trickle in. But Julie, thank you so much for joining us today. And just as a reminder for everybody, the resource room will have all of the recording slides, LinkedIn, and resources. You also get an email from us. So Julie, thanks again. And
My pleasure. Thank you. Thanks everybody for coming out on this holiday. It feels like a holiday ever since July, right?
yeah,
You're spending
vacation
it
season.
spending it with us.
Thank you so much. Uh, Julie, you're free to go, but I'll stay on
Great.
here. And
All
thanks
right, you
again.
wrap things up. All right. Thanks everybody.